investigating a death shooting that took place in Algiers.
Police are also investigating a murder in Algiers. Just before 8, an officer on patrol heard gunshots near LB Landry and General de Gaulle.
New information on the breaking news we first told you about at 5 o'clock. One man is after being shot several times in Algiers.
Robert Johnson Jr., better known as Kilo G, was 20 years old, a father, a rapper, and a ghost before the sun ever rose again. On January 14th, 1997, he spent the day like many before it, bouncing between the East Bank and the West Bank. By nightfall, Kilo found himself in Algiers, across the Mississippi, at the Live Oaks apartment complex.
There's some amazing artwork inside there as well. This is just incredible. Look at this.
To outsiders, it was just another low-rise project tucked behind General de Gaulle Drive. But to locals, it was a war zone wrapped in silence, a place where people disappeared, and no one ever saw a thing. Kilo was visiting his girlfriend, Lakeisha. She lived there with their infant son. At 20, Kilo had already lived longer than some of his friends, but not long enough to feel safe. Some say he seemed tense that night, distracted, paranoid. He spoke little, smoked a cigarette on the porch, kept looking down the street, kept his distance from the phone. Maybe he was tired. Maybe something had happened earlier in the day. Or maybe he knew something was coming. We'll never know for sure. What we do know is that Kilo stayed the night. He was still there when the city fell asleep. And he would never leave that apartment alive.
Kilo G ended up being shot.
January 15th, 1997. Just past 4 a.m., the kind of hour when even the streetlights seem to blink slower. When the whole city exhales. And anything can happen. Inside the Live Oaks apartment complex, a door opened. A man was standing there. Not kicking it in, not shouting, just knocking, like he'd done it before. Kilo came to the door while his girlfriend slept. We don't know what was said between them. A few words, maybe less. What we do know is that the conversation ended with gunfire. 3 shots cracked the quiet. One struck Kilo in the chest. Another hit his side. The last tore into his face. He stumbled forward, bleeding, and collapsed just outside the apartment. Lakeisha screamed and rushed out their bedroom. She moved to rush towards him to help, but before she could get out the door, Kilo raised a shaking hand and stopped her. "Don't come out here," he told her. "They might hit you too." Then he dropped to the ground. The shooter vanished into the night, silent and swift. He didn't steal anything. He didn't look back. He came to hit, and he left the job finished. A neighbor called 911.
This happened shortly before 5 o'clock on Odeon Avenue at Ptolemy Street. The name of the victim has not been released.
Across the river, NOPD homicide detective Charles Watkins was already on patrol. He got the dispatch, a shooting in Algiers Live Oaks. He pulled up on Merle Street and found a woman sobbing on the stoop. That was Lakeisha. Kilo G, Robert L. Johnson Jr., lay nearby on the sidewalk, choking on his own blood, still alive, but fading fast. Detective Watkins knelt beside him, leaned in, asked the only question that mattered. "Who shot you?" Kilo opened his mouth, tried to speak, but no words came. His lips moved, his eyes searched, but whatever he knew, he couldn't say it. The blood had already silenced him. Paramedics loaded him into the ambulance. Lakeisha held her son inside the apartment, still shaking. Kilo never made it to the hospital. Robert Johnson Jr., son, father, artist, and one of the first voices of Cash Money Records, was pronounced dead minutes later. He was 20 years old. Some passings echo. Others disappear into whispers. Kilo G's left both. There was no press conference, no official tributes. The mainstream didn't. But in New Orleans, people felt it.
How do you deal with one of your best friends who's in your group, that you guys came up together, you had all the success together? He gets murdered before he can even legally drink.
Right. It's hard, man. I mean, we still deal with it daily.
They talked about how he'd grown quiet lately, how he moved different, how something had been weighing on him. His friends, the one who knew him before Cash Money, remembered him as soft-spoken, focused, just a kid trying to rap his way out. Big Row, who produced his debut album, The Sleepwalker, would later say he never got in no trouble. He wasn't no bad kid at all. Everybody loved him. Blessed with talent and a great flow. But it wasn't just his friends who were grieving. It was his label too. At least, it should have been.
Kilo was Cash Money's very first artist.
Cash Money Records made no public statement. No song, no shout-out, no memorial tape. For the first artist they ever signed, the silence was deafening. Lakeisha, Kilo's girlfriend and the mother of his son, was one of the only people who spoke to police. She was at the scene. She saw him dying. And when the detectives asked her if she knew who could have done it, she said only this: he was having problems with his record label. That was the first whisper, and it wouldn't be the last. Years later, Lil Wayne, then just a kid, coming up in Cash Money's second wave, would name Kilo G as one of his early influences. On New Orleans radio, he recalled, "I was a huge Kilo G fan. I had the wax, man." That's how long ago that was. But that came long after the fact, after the success, after the money, after the memory had faded for everyone but those who really knew him. Robert L. Johnson Jr. was born in 1976 and raised in New Orleans. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't bouncing through clubs like some of his peers. He was quiet, observant, the kind of kid who stayed inside, writing when other boys were playing ball. He started rapping young, scribbling verses in notebooks and memorizing rhymes off Ghetto Boys and Scarface tapes. At 14, he got shot. Two brothers from New Orleans, Brian Baby Williams and Ronald Slim Williams, were building something. They called it Cash Money Records. They wanted someone different, not bounce, not party music. Someone who told street stories like the ones they lived. They found Kilo G. But Kilo was still a minor, so Baby had to cross the river to Algiers and get his grandmother's permission, signature on paper, contract in hand. That's how Kilo G became the first artist ever signed to Cash Money.
I always think about when we first got Cash Money, and he was the first artist on the label, and he was the first, we met him, and whatever. And Kilo would always have these stories from, I would actually initiate and ask him about it.
Right.
And I'll be like, damn, dog, what it's like, being on the road, hearing yourself on the radio, doing this, doing that. He always tell me, man, it's fun, bro. You have a lot of fun.
In 1992, they released The Sleepwalker. Kilo was 15. The album was raw, eerie, and full of horror movie themes. Hits, revenge, paranoia, blood. It didn't sound like anything coming out of New Orleans at the time, and that was the point. He followed it with The Bloody City in 1995. A darker, more grounded project. Less horror, more reality. He rapped about fatherhood, regret, poverty, and passing. Some said he sounded... But then, Kilo had dropped out of school. He was living with Lakeisha and raising their son. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. But he was respected.
Kilo came out with that Blood City album. New Orleans was a little more ready for him, man.
Right.
You know, they accepted him, but you know what I mean? Unfortunately, he passed right after that album.
He was also being left behind. Cash Money was changing. Faster beats, flashier artists, new names like BG, Juvenile, and a prodigy named Lil Wayne. The label was leaning into bounce, into money, into everything Kilo G wasn't.
Finding ways to turn 1 to 10, 10 to 100. So it wasn't about just being kosher with making a fruit out of it.
And yet, his voice still haunted the speakers of every car that rolled past in New Orleans. He wasn't a hitmaker. He was a storyteller.
He was serious, dog. He was way before his time.
Fact.
I mean, he wasn't really accepted in New Orleans because of that. You know what I'm saying? Because of his lyrical skills and content. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't doing no bounce at all.
Right.
So, you know, back then, New Orleans was creating the sound. You know what I'm saying? New Orleans bounce was coming up. And he wasn't really doing that. So, but he had other fans in different states that really loved him. You know what I mean?
In the weeks following his passing, there were still no arrests, no suspects named publicly, just closed mouths and long shadows. In the streets of New Orleans, when justice doesn't speak, rumor does. And the rumor about who hit Kilo G started fast. Some say it was a personal beef, nothing to do with music, just two men with bad blood, and one of them deciding to end it. Others swore it was deeper than that. It was business. They whispered, label business. Lakeisha told police he had been having problems with his record label. No names, no specifics, just that things weren't right. That line found its way into the detective's report and into the streets. Because by early 1997, Cash Money Records was changing fast, and not everyone was coming with them. Sources say Birdman, then just Baby, had decided to cut loose the old roster. The artists who helped build the label were being pushed out to make room for new acts and bigger deals. Later that same year, Cash Money would sign a multi-million-dollar distribution deal with Universal. But by then, Kilo G was already gone. He was hit before he ever saw the money, before the world knew what Cash Money even was. That's timing. It made people talk. And they kept talking when another original Cash Money rapper, Yellow Boy, from the group UNLV, was hit just a few months later. He was shot in his car. No arrest. No answers. The streets linked the two hits.
But one thing that we always discussed when he was living that, we'll never let the name UNLV die. You know, we started out as two, added him to the group, and you know, we always remain the same, bro.
Some said Yellow Boy had gotten into a fight with Birdman, that he disrespected the wrong people, that Kilo had done the same, that they were both reminders that in this business, loyalty is everything, and disloyalty is dangerous.
Whatever happened, we gotta keep the shit rolling, brother, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it is very unfortunate, but everybody gotta...
But it was all whispers. Nobody ever said it on the record. Nobody with weight ever named names. To this day, there is no evidence tying Cash Money, Birdman, or anyone affiliated with the label to Kilo G's hit. Just rumors, repeated, recycled, reinforced by silence. And maybe that's what makes them feel true. In the days after Kilo G's passing, the city kept moving, and the investigators got to work. The crime scene offered little to work with. No shell casings, no eyewitnesses willing to talk. Just a young man deceased on the pavement, and a girlfriend holding a baby inside. Detectives canvassed Live Oaks. They spoke to residents. Eventually, they got a tip, a name, a suspect. He wasn't a stranger. He was already being looked at for another hit in the same complex. Same MO, same silence. A man who moved at night and lived with his girlfriend nearby. Police hoped she might flip, that she'd talk if they got her alone. But she didn't. Nobody did. Detectives later admitted they had a solid suspect, but with no confession, no cooperation, and no physical evidence that could stick, the case went cold. Kilo G leaves behind his partner, Lakeisha, as well as their son, Robert L. Johnson Jr. Rest in peace, Kilo G.